Thank you for tuning in. You are listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm your host, Daniel Davis. Today, joining us on the program is someone who's going to take us on an eco journey to find out the steps that we need to take to be able to heal our planet. After all, because we like to burn those fossil fuels, especially here in America, where we use more than one-fifth of the world's resources and we're like less than 20% of the world's population, people are starting to get a little bit aggravated about our habits. It's not that we want to do the wrong thing, it's just that sometimes we habitually get into doing the wrong thing without realizing the repercussions that might be involved in doing that. Many of you have probably been familiar with the Al Gore film, which won an Academy Award, An Inconvenient Truth, to find out just what the alarming rate of global warming is. Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program is Anank Nunkai, and he's going to be talking with us today about what it is to be able to, what we can do, to be able to heal our planet. Just to give you an idea, he was born in 1947 to the Shuar of the sacred waterfalls deep in the Ecuadorian Amazon. He's a Yuishuan, traditional healer as it's known, is guided by an Artuan and the wisdom of his ancestors. He's joining us here on the program along with another guest, Catherine Nunink, and she's going to be actually kind of interpreting what his wise words are. And I'd like to welcome both of you to the Beyond 50 radio program today.
Hello, Daniel.
Now, tell us about Anank's background and what it is that he is doing currently to be able to, I guess, educate people about the right steps that we can take individually to change the kind of habits that we have.
¿Cómo podemos cambiar nuestros hábitos para un mejor medio ambiente?
Para el mejor ambiente, nosotros, el número uno es saber tratar la vida natural y educarse cómo debemos hacer, tomar un buen camino para la protección ambiental.
He's saying that the primary thing is that we need to understand how to treat the natural world and how to feel that the environment is important to us.
Y asimismo tenemos que educarnos a compartir con todos los sabios poderes tradicionales, porque ellos fueron lo natural y esto es donde que nos va a guiar el mejor tratamiento y convertirse en sano ambiente para la vida sana.
And he said that we need to educate ourselves and appreciate some of the traditional knowledge and learn from it as to how better treat the environment.
What I find really fascinating as I've explored some of the works of anthropologist Wade Davis and many others is that when you look at indigenous peoples, they seem to have truly been born into a world that has taught them just wisdom that even far surpasses, typical education in many ways. And I wonder, what it must be like for them to be experiencing the kinds of things that are happening in their world today.
¿Cómo sientes que pasa en nuestro mundo ahora? Por ejemplo, ¿qué pasa en su selva ahora? ¿Cómo sientes de este?
Bueno, la cultura Shuar y muchas culturas nativas de la selva y en el mundo estamos frustrados por el sofocamiento de la tecnología, los mismos que están creando una contaminación muy fuerte sin esperanza.
So he said that the Shuar people from the rainforest, along with other native people around the world, are very frustrated that the natural world is being suffocated by technology and that there is so much contamination from our chemical way of living.
Mm-hmm. Y por ende, nosotros estamos como un cáncer incurable, esta contaminación, porque no hay esperanzas como la protección de la cultura Shuar y otros nativos, porque las culturas nativas no somos de la ciudad para obtener fácilmente el dinero.
So he's saying that it's very frustrating and that it's suffocating, and it seems like a hopeless, incurable cancer because the native people are not from the city, so therefore they don't really have the funds they need to get out there and get their message out and to educate people on how they can live more sustainably.
Now, I understand that Anank is a traditional Shuar healer. What is that, first of all, and what is the word for that in your language?
¿Cómo es la palabra Shuar para curandero tradicional?
Para la lengua Shuar, curandero tradicional quiere decir Uvishin.
The Shuar word for a traditional healer is Uwishin.
Uvishin quiere decir sabio poder, conectado con los poderes naturales y sobrenaturales.
And what that word means is the powerful knowledge that is connected to the powers of the natural world.
Sobrenaturales.
About the natural world.
Entonces, ellos, o sea, los Uvishin, son involucrados con las plantas sagradas y con las hierbas tradicionales. Y ellos son los únicos entendidos como para proteger la salud de los Shuar y de las otras culturas.
So he's saying that the Uwishin are involved with using sacred plants and traditional herbs, and
ellos son los únicos entendidos de proteger la salud de la cultura Shuar y de otros seres humanos.
And they are the only ones that understand how to protect the health of the Shuar and of others.
Nosotros, en mi cultura, somos únicos Uvishin que respetamos mucho, porque así como en las culturas occidentales tienen sus protectores de la salud que se llaman los médicos.
He's saying in his culture, the Uwishin respect the knowledge of the healer, and in our culture, the protectors of the health is what we call doctors.
It leads me to a most curious question, especially this day and age, when there is so much, I want to call it capitalism on the suffering of others, and people believe they're doing this in good faith, where we have things such as Walk for the Cure, Run for the Cure, you name it. There's a whole gamut of things. And so cancer is one of these prevailing things that they try to conquer here in America, when in fact we've actually done a program where cancer was cured more than 100 years ago. And I'm kind of wondering, or actually I am wondering, and if you could tell our listeners, what kind of diseases do you see today that were never prevalent in the rainforest?
La pregunta es, en la selva no hay tanta enfermedad. ¿Cómo ves en este país con tantos tipos de diferentes enfermedades?
Bueno, es una pregunta muy importante. En la selva casi no conocemos lo que existe, tantas enfermedades desconocidas en las ciudades, o más que todo en los países tecnológicos.
He's saying that's a very important question, because in the rainforest there just doesn't exist these kind of illnesses that they have in the cities of the more developed countries.
En los países tecnológicos existe, cada día nace diferentes tipos de enfermedades. Este es a través de la composición de la construcción de los científicos de diferentes tipos de vidas naturales.
So he's saying in the technology countries, every day different sicknesses are being born as a result of a lot of different things that scientists are inventing.
Mm-hmm.
Y esta creación de los científicos son donde que el aire contamina y están creando diferentes tipos de virus donde que los mismos científicos no pueden descubrir.
And he's saying that a lot of different things that scientists are inventing are contaminating the air, which is difficult for them to discover the results of this, the work that they're doing and the illnesses that it's creating.
Mm-hmm. Y por eso nosotros, todos los seres humanos, tenemos que concientizar para dar un buen paso, porque los seres humanos buscamos vivir en paz y lleno de salud.
And he's saying that all human beings need to discover this because every living being wants to walk the path of health and peace.
Now tell me, Anank, how do you learn to become a healer, and does it take a while? I mean, this seems to be like a tremendous discipline, and I think all of us need to learn.
¿Cómo ha aprendido a ser curandero y qué tiempo se necesita el desarrollo para empezar a curar?
Bueno, yo de mi parte, aproximadamente cuando yo tenía 8 años, tuve un hermano muy famoso curandero, Ubishin.
He said when he was 8 years old, his brother was a famous Uwishin.
Me dio primer paso para entrar en el camino de Ubishin, donde que yo aprendí muchas cosas muy importantes.
And this is when he started the first time to guide Anank down the path of learning to be an Uwishin and teaching him some extremely important things.
Para ser Ubishin no es cosa fácil, es un camino muy duro y hay que ser escogido por Arutam.
He said to be an Uwishin is a very difficult path to take, and the people that, in his culture, the people that become Uwishin were chosen by Arutam, and Arutam is the Shuar word for the Great Spirit.
Y para aprender, un principiante de Ubishin, para aprender a curar primera vez, tiene que demorar muchos años, aproximadamente 4 o 5 años o más.
And it's at least 5 or 6 years of learning before they would ever be able to even begin to heal somebody.
Y para entrar a curar también depende el maestro que lo ponga órdenes y cuando haya terminado su dieta.
And to begin healing depends on what his teacher tells them whether they are ready or not, and whether they have followed all the instructions the teacher gave them. If they had followed all the lessons and all the instructions well, then the teacher decides when they are ready to start healing.
Y cuando antes de que haya cumplido su dieta o orden de su maestro, se puede y entran a trabajar o curar, esto se puede neutralizar su mundo espiritual y su mundo de poder, de curación, y se puede quebrantarse su vida de Ubishin.
And so it's only at that point, when you have finished the instructions from your teacher, that is only the beginning of the life you will lead, spiritual life and the life of a healer. The learning process and the developmental process continues on your entire life.
You know, and thinking about what has been just shared with me, I wonder, what do you think about the current spiritual health of a technological society?
¿Qué es su opinión de la salud espiritualmente de un país desarrollado?
Bueno, no es cosa fácil, porque curar cáncer, diabetes, SIDA y otros, como es problemas psicológicos, no es cosa fácil, pero para curar estas enfermedades tan fuertes, tiene que pasar más arriba de su nivel o 100% de su poder.
La pregunta es, en su opinión, ¿cómo es la salud de un país desarrollado? ¿Cómo es la salud espiritualmente de la gente en un país desarrollado?
Espiritualmente, la salud de los digamos, la salud de los humanos de los países desarrollados es muy frustrante. Es muy frustrante y es muy fuerte y muy difícil.
So he's saying that, well, first he said that to heal the more serious illnesses that we have in this country, like cancer, diabetes, AIDS, is very difficult, and an Uashin has to receive extremely high levels of power to be able to deal with these types of illnesses. And then he also said that the spiritual health of people in the developed countries, that topic is a bit frustrating for him, that that aspect has been a bit lost on a lot of people.
Porque espiritualmente la gente no están involucrados al camino espiritual por la inclinación tecnológica y están desconectados totalmente, tanto espiritual y tanto psicológico.
He's saying that's because that in general, the people are not involved that much in the spiritual path because they are so inclined towards technology that they have become disconnected from that path.
Porque son inclinados más al materialismo.
Because they're more inclined towards materialistic things. In general.
It just almost seems overwhelming sometimes to think that people in a technological society have put them in a state of affairs where they're sort of like, as I would kind of say, the rat running around in a wheel thinking that it's getting somewhere, and in the whole time it's exhausting itself of all of not only its spiritual energy, but then its true physical energy and loving energy as well. What are some steps people can take who listen to this program today to be able to begin to heal their heart and to refresh their soul and revitalize their physical state and well-being?
So, la gente que escuchando esta entrevista, ¿qué ellos pueden hacer para curar el corazón y para tomar un mejor camino espiritualmente?
¿Pueden curarse? Dice.
¿Cómo curar el corazón y para tomar un mejor camino espiritualmente? La gente que están escuchando esta entrevista ahora, ¿qué ellos pueden hacer para
curarse?
Para tener un camino más espiritualmente y curar el corazón, queremos decir.
Ya.
Sentimentales.
Bien. En primer lugar, solo con escuchar mi mensaje no van a tomar un buen camino. Lo más importante es practicar con alguien que es entendido, porque ellos van a hablar profundamente y tocarle la conciencia.
He's saying that the best thing to do is to practice with someone who understands the spiritual path. So seek out someone that has the wisdom in this area and study with them and learn from them and practice what they teach them about spirituality.
Hay que estar en contacto con una persona espiritual para que ellos puedan mejor practicar y descubrir su mundo real, dejando a un lado la fantasía ideológica.
And because when you study with a spiritual person, you will discover a real world, and you can put aside a world of fantasy.
Solamente con escuchar este mensaje no van a aprender, no van a dar un buen paso, sino que se necesita ojo por ojo, cara por cara y voz para poner en práctica y así aprender y entrar a la concientización.
Right. So, if somebody is inspired by listening to his message, then they need to more than just be inspired by the message. They need to actually take some kind of action and contact somebody that is an expert in the world of spirituality and follow that inclination step by step by step.
Y entrar a la concientización.
And it will enter into their conscience.
Now, in your experience, as somebody, say, approaches you and says, I just want to transform the way I am being in the world, what kind of, I guess, feedback, for lack of a better word, have you received from people who feel that they have truly transformed and what the world now looks like to them?
Tus clientes que trabajan contigo en el mundo espiritual, ¿cómo esto cambió la vida de ellos?
En primer lugar, hay que tener amor para recibir a un cliente.
Uh-huh. So he's saying the first thing is he needs to have love. He needs to have an open heart to be able to receive a client.
En segundo, ese paciente hay que preguntar si está decidido cambiar su vida negativa al positivo. Esas dos preguntas muy importantes para que dé un buen paso.
And then he said he needs to have patience, and the second thing he does is he asks the person, have they decided to change all the negativity and the negative ideas in their life? Have they decided to make that change to positive ideas and a positive way of life?
Y en tercero, hay que saber entenderle y respetarle a los clientes la decisión de ellos. Y este amor que se está tejiendo unos a otros y palabras donde que va a profundizar y tocar la conciencia y otras palabras más importantes, ahí es donde que va a poder cambiar.
So he's saying that he needs to know his clients and understand the intentions of his clients so that he is able to profoundly touch their conscience. And oh, go ahead.
Las personas no pueden cambiar pronto su vida del negativo al positivo porque están dentro de la casa. Depende dentro de la casa que tengan diferentes tipos de problemas o durante su trabajo, qué tipo de problemas. Esto es donde que les frustra más, pero junto conmigo va a recibir palabras dulces, más dulces que la miel, y eso es donde que va a transformarse a la persona.
He's saying, so sometimes it's difficult for people to change quickly from a lot of negativity to positivity because there can be all kinds of different influences in the house in which they live. But when they are with him and he speaks to them with sweet words like honey, when they're with him, they begin to feel the transformation and feel the peace. But it it takes time for a transformation because if you spending some time with him and you feel very transformed, but then you go home and your life at home can have a lot of negative influences. You can feel like you slide back a little bit, and then so it goes back and forth a little by little, forward. So it's just not the kind of thing that happens overnight.
Well, I wouldn't imagine it would, especially if you've spent a lifetime getting to where you're at. But you can see where, for instance, the outcome of it would be so tremendous as you look at the world differently and realize, how did I ever buy into all this nonsense in the first place?
Yeah, it's true. And I've seen people that, after working a long time to change their path, absolutely just sort of glowing, and you can tell the glow comes from the inside because there's some kind of inner peace. For example, when people meet Anank, they're really drawn to him, and they can sense it, they can feel it. They see that he's got this great inner peace, and they want some of that. Because life is so frustrating. Yeah, life can be so frustrating, and it is a challenge to live a positive life because wherever you go, you're faced with negativity all over the place, whether it's at work or whether it's when you go home or, people that watch television are bombarded with negativity every second, and all these horrific images and horrific concepts, and so it's a battle. It's not easy to. It's easier to be negative than it is to be positive, actually.
Yeah, I was going to also make an interesting point about what you were saying, about being bombarded by negative images, which all seem to be broadcasting a message that's positive, and they have something to get you out of your negativity, which got you there in the first place. But, the thing about it is to realize that you can, take that step forward, and people probably who have never experienced what it means to be positive doesn't know what it means that once you're in that state, that real authentic state that you're talking about, that true abundance really comes to you. Now, in Anunk's world and in the world of the indigenous people, what does abundance really look like, and how is it different from, there'll be obvious differences, but how is it different from, say, the Western technological world?
La pregunta es, para la gente Shuar, ¿qué es el concepto de abundancia?
Bueno, en primer lugar, no conocemos esa palabra abundancia, porque los Shuar nos hemos conformado con una mínima cosa con lo que tenemos.
Repetir, por favor.
En primer lugar, los Shuar no sabemos qué es la palabra abundancia. O sea, quiero decir,
in the first place, they don't know this word, abundance.
Porque los Shuar nos conformamos con lo que tenemos una mínima cosa.
Because
con poquita.
They are so happy and so comfortable with even just the littlest thing. Every little thing is like a treasure. So they don't even really understand that concept of abundance because each tiny thing is just a wonderful treasure to them.
Suficiente con lo que tenemos, pocas cosas.
They're very happy with just a few little things.
Pero por esto, en el mundo tecnológico, en el mundo de las ciudades, o sea, la gente humana de las ciudades, es la gran frustración y destrucción psicológica, espiritual, físico, la destrucción de eso, psicológico, físico y espiritual, es porque ellos tienen suficiente abundancia, pero no se conforman, y es donde que se destruye solos.
Mm. So he's saying in the city and in the technological world, this is an enormous frustration psychologically, spiritually, and physically because people actually have abundance, but it's not sufficient. They're not satisfied with that.
Like they can never have enough. It's like how many yachts can we ski behind?
Well, even on a smaller scale, it's always something else. Like I just want a new cell phone because I want a blue one.
Right, exactly.
Or I want a red one. I already have a cell phone. It works fine. It's great. But now they've come out with a new one that's, I don't know, pink, and so I want a pink one. I don't know, but
no, an interesting story on that too, Catherine. When you talk about how we need a cell phone, is when you truly take a look at your life, you realize there are really basic things that you need. The rest are just wants and desires. We happened to be at a mall one time, and we were doing where we were actually letting people know about our radio program, and I happened to walk by a kiosk that was selling cell phones. And she says, "Do you have this particular model?" And I said, "No, I don't." She says, "Well, let's take a look at this." And I said, "Well, I don't have a cell phone either." And she says, "Well, you need a cell phone." And I said, "No, you really don't." And I went on to say, as she decided to argue with me about why I didn't need a cell phone. And my wife and I had been stranded, so to speak, just sort of almost out in the middle of nowhere, but there was a lot of highway traffic. And we had to call a tow truck. And, of course, somebody stops by and says, "Here, use my cell phone." So for the next 3 hours, as we're waiting for the tow truck to show up, several people stopped by, and I said, "Is it okay if I use your cell phone to find out the status of this tow truck?" And it was just really interesting that we didn't need a cell phone, but we were actually rescued without having to have this necessity that she felt we needed to have. So it's taking inventory about what's necessary. So what would Anank say to our audience? What are the things that we need?
So él quiere, ¿qué quieres decir a la gente que está escuchando esta entrevista? ¿Qué cada ser humano necesita? ¿Qué es las necesidades más básicas que la gente necesita?
Lo más importante, los seres humanos necesitan el amor.
He said love.
Nosotros, los seres
the most important
humanos,
thing that human beings need is love.
Los seres humanos no necesitamos hierros, aceros que hablan así, materialísticamente, porque ellos no tienen conciencia, no tienen corazón, no tienen sentido, sino que son electrónicos que disfrutan, que hacen disfrutar a los seres humanos. Es la conexión materialística y que le destruye la mente humana.
So he's saying that the reason he said that is because the material things that people desire, these objects, they don't have a conscience, they don't have a heart, they don't have feelings. And so if you're spending all of your energy and all of your time focusing on these objects that don't have a heart or conscience or feelings, then this is deteriorating your emotions and your mind. And what is much more important in life is to enjoy people.
Los seres humanos de la ciudad, o sea, hablo de la tecnología, de los países tecnológicos, la frustración humana está creando la televisión, las películas, las músicas, los teléfonos, computadoras, las tiendas, etcétera, y los carros, etcétera, etcétera.
He's saying that the people that live in technological countries and that live in the city, their frustration is created by these things like television, movies, phones, computers, and cars.
Tiendas de corporaciones.
¿Endas?
Tiendas, store.
Oh,
tiendas de corporaciones como de ropas, como computadoras, etcétera, etcétera.
Right. And stores, corporate stores.
Estos son los seres humanos que deben impedir, o sea, protegerse de no ingresar mucho o evitar evitar tantos problemas de inclinación al materialismo, porque esto mismo está destruyendo la naturaleza y estamos destruyendo nuestra vida.
So he's saying that people should protect themselves by becoming too involved so deeply in all of these things, and maybe try to use some of these things less, because not only are these the things that are destroying people's emotions and frustrating them psychologically, but these are also the same things that are destroying the natural world.
Mi mensaje para todo el mundo, escuchante de este radio de esta prestigiosa radio, es disfrutar sanamente con la familia, poniendo el amor en medio de la familia.
He's saying his message for the world and for the people listening to this radio show is that the most important thing is to enjoy a healthy life with your family and to enjoy your family.
Poniendo el amor, el corazón en el centro de todos, porque esto es lo que se dice, dulzura entre todos antes de buscar la enemistad viendo los negocios. Porque los negocios son lo que crean enemistades, frustraciones, destrucciones, separaciones, etcétera, etcétera.
He's saying that you need to put love and to put your heart into the center of everything and to put sweetness in your life before you go out seeking enemies or having problems with business, because these are the things that create frustration and reasons why people end up separating sometimes.
I understand that you want to create an ethnobiological preserve. Tell us about that.
Él entiendo que ustedes quieren crear un etnobiológica preservar. ¿Lo que significa esto?
Bueno, etnobiológico es cuidar a la naturaleza, que es la sobrevivencia de los humanos. Preservar es rescatar a la cultura Shuar y otras culturas que están destruyéndose y separándose y cerca de extinguir su cultura.
He's saying that ethnobiological symbolizes that to preserve the natural world and to preserve the culture and to protect it from being destroyed, because ethno means the culture and biological meaning the rainforest.
Y asimismo, nosotros sí conservamos o preservamos, no va a ser solamente de la cultura Shuar, sino que esto es una vivencia y la atracción al mundo entero, porque la selva es el pulmón del mundo entero.
He's saying it's for conservation and preservation, not only for the Shuar people, but they want to attract people from the whole world, because the rainforest is for everybody in the world, because the rainforest is the lungs of the world that purifies the air that we've been making so dirty.
That also goes for our water too. It must be, I don't know, fascinating or interesting, I don't even know which word to use, that in Anank's world with his people, with people of indigenous cultures, to be seeing people drinking water out of a bottle. I mean, that's just madness right there, to think I'm getting fresh spring water because it says so, but it's in a bottle.
And it's such a pertinent issue right now, because in the part of the rainforest where Anank came from, the people that live in the jungle are having such a difficult time because all the rivers have been polluted. Mm-hmm. And so villages deep in the jungle, they live in the rainforest, and all they have is a little drip, drip, drip of clean water to drink, because they're river people, and now the rivers are polluted, the fish die, so animals don't come to the river anymore, and they don't know what to do with themselves anymore, because even if it was far away where there was contamination from drilling for oil or whatever, everything flows downstream. So
Sure.
It affects all of the rivers. And here are these people that have been living in the forest for 10,000 years, and they don't have clean water to drink, and they live in the rainforest. It's amazing.
Right.
So, ¿qué piensas cuando tú veo la gente pueden tomar agua de una botella?
Bueno, esta agua, para mí, no sé, es de la ciudad. Pero en comparación, en mi cultura, nosotros tenemos propios ríos que no gastamos dinero, sino que nos regala la naturaleza, la sobrevivencia de los humanos.
He's saying that for him, he feels like this water is from the city because in his culture, they all had their own rivers, which was their livelihood, and that water is a gift from the natural world.
Este agua que están consumiendo, una parte es buena o mala también. A través de esto, la ciencia dice son sanas, son aguas limpias, pero no sabemos así, investigando muy profundo, el líquido es bueno o es solamente un negocio.
He's saying that when we consume this water from a bottle, they've told us that it's clean water, but do we really know that for sure? We need to investigate profoundly as to whether or not this is true or it's just, another business.
Well, that's the thing about that too, Catherine, is the fact that people don't even question this anymore. You pulled it off the shelf, and you're unquestioningly going to drink it because a label tells you that's the right thing to do, or you hear it from someone else that you don't even know who seems credible. And nobody ever stops to just question the simplicity of things anymore. They just kind of take it at face value. And that seems to be an alarming psychological way of living just in and of itself.
Yeah, and that's true because actually your tap water goes through much stricter restrictions than the bottled water does. So it's actually better to just put a filter on your tap water and drink that. And the other thing that's incredibly alarming is the amount of plastic water bottles people use is frightening, and only a very small percentage of those ever actually get recycled. So it's just sickening how much of that is just filling up the landfills.
Catherine, does Anank think that there is any hope for us to turn this all around and to get back to, I guess you would call it, the simple life again?
Anank, ¿piensas esta esperanza para el futuro y la gente puede cambiar el camino para una vida más simple ahora? ¿Piensas tenemos esperanza para el futuro?
Primeramente, la gente, para que haya la esperanza, necesitamos concientización. Segundo, habrá la esperanza muchos siglos si mientras no continúa la destrucción.
So he's saying that first, for people to have hope, they need to be conscientious about what's going on. They need to be aware or more aware about what's going on. And to have hope for the many centuries to follow, they need to stop the destruction right away.
Una cosa muy importante para que para que todo el mundo tengamos la esperanza es dejando a un lado el orgullo y la ambición. Podemos compartir con la sabiduría de los antepasados porque ellos fueron lo natural y vamos a tener muchos años de vida y salud y tener un buen ambiente.
He's saying that the most important thing of all is for that people need to put aside their pride and their ambition and to share the knowledge of their ancestors because they knew they knew how to live with the natural world. And if people do this, there is great hope for the future. And it is possible to change things around. But we can learn a lot from the knowledge of our ancestors.
Y con esta sabiduría, con estas enseñanzas sanas, puras, limpias, nosotros vamos a formar un solo ser humano sin diferencia de colores y vamos a desarrollar nuevamente nuestro maravilloso universo.
He's saying with these healthy lessons that we can learn from our ancestors, we can form one being that is without regard for different races or backgrounds and live together in this beautiful universe.
Más importante, vamos en medio de esta pregunta que el Señor me está haciendo, vamos a poner corazón en el medio de esto, vamos a poner el corazón y todo el mundo vamos a poner la mano en el encima del corazón y esto palpitación vamos a contagiarnos para la esperanza de tener un amor verdadero y la esperanza de rescatar la contaminación y el desarrollo ambiental.
So he's saying that in the middle of your question, he wanted to put the part that if people put their hand on their heart, and they can feel the palpitation of their heart, and they feel the true love, then it'll open up their conscience, and then they can develop, and it can be a beautiful world.
Mm-hmm. As people listen to this program, they might even think to themselves, well, I've read, like, for instance, an alternatives magazine or sort of a new age magazine, and I found shamans in there that can heal and they can send love, and I've heard interviews or even perhaps even watched television or a movie, for instance, and you hear this and they think, well, this just seems a little fringe for me. And I think what's interesting about that is because we're so used to relating with each other in a technological society the way that we do, that we've really closed ourselves off from true, authentic connection. So someone like an Anank comes along and has this message, and they go, okay, here we are, healing the world, loving thy neighbor, and yada, 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 if you will. And I think it's funny because that reaction, almost knee-jerk instinctive reaction, is, I don't believe that it's possible to be that happy, to be that loving, when in fact it truly is. As a person listens to this, would you say that they're facing a fear that they're afraid to really feel what authenticity and what authentic love truly means?
Well, personally, I think it's a little sad that they've never met anybody that seems that genuinely happy.
Right. And do you see the threat,
right
though, that I'm talking about, the fear that I'm talking about, where they go, that's one of those woo-woo visionaries again, but in fact, it's an authentic, loving language.
Right. ¿Piensas la gente tiene miedo de vivir en un vida con amor en verdadero?
¿Tienen miedo de vivir una vida verdadera? ¿Cómo?
Una vida con amor verdadera, porque ellos están tanto involucrados en la tecnología y no entiendo que es posible para tener suficiente feliz y amor en la vida.
Por supuesto que el mundo, la humanidad que están involucrados en los países tecnológicos tienen miedo de cambiar su vida porque aman el dinero.
He's saying that, yes, of course, some people that live in the technological worlds are afraid to change their life because they're so wrapped up in money.
Mm-hmm. Entonces, si ellos aman el dinero, va a ser muy difícil de cambiar y de transformarse del mundo negativo al mundo positivo.
And so if their first true love is money, then it is difficult for them to be able to transform their life into a life that is focused on things that are less material. It's hard to grasp the concept. It's hard to understand because it's so integrated in every cell of their body.
Mm-hmm. What's interesting too, Catherine, go ahead.
Comprendo que todos los seres humanos hay que trabajar para vivir en este mundo, pero no hay que desconectarse el mundo espiritual con el mundo del sentimiento.
He said that he understands that people have to work to live, but it's just there's such a huge disconnect between that and the spiritual world now.
Mm-hmm. And where your work should be spiritual.
But that would be nice.
I just keep remembering many years ago seeing a movie with Bill Murray, and it was where he just was frustrated with his life, World War I veteran, for instance, and so he goes on a pilgrimage of his own to find out spirituality, and so he's off to the Himalayas. And so while he's, in this area, he's trying to find a way to find this spirituality, so to speak. And a particular person that he comes across says, see, Westerners keep missing it. Spirituality isn't something you go seek. It's something that you are every day and every minute. It's in your work. It's how you play. It's how you interact with other people. When you start searching, just start searching within your own heart. And, as you take a look at, for instance, say in America today, and you were reverting to earlier about money, if you ask pretty much most Americans, we all believe that we need money to live. And that really becomes frustrating when you follow that particular symbol. That must almost seem like, at times, madness for someone like Anank and his kind of people.
Yeah, he doesn't really grasp it at all. He doesn't really understand.
I can imagine he wouldn't. I mean, because you're using money to exchange for natural things you could just find out there by yourself.
Yeah. And, the interesting thing is when people do go on this quest for spirituality and they go to Tibet or whatever, what is the first people that are the gurus or the monks or the whatever, the spiritual knowledgeable people that they seek out? The first thing these people did on their spiritual quest was give up all their material things to take the spiritual path. That's what the gurus do. That's what the monks do. That's the first thing on their path as when they start. They start at a very young age, but the first thing they do on their quest, on their spiritual path, is give up every material thing ever, and they go and live in a monastery or live out in the woods or whatever. But that's the first thing they always do, because these material things bind you down, and that's what causes you so much worry and stress, and it's blocking all the nice feelings that could be coming in instead.
Now, it must have been interesting for Anank to come to the United States. Were there particular obstacles that he had encountered that he might have found, I just didn't expect that?
¿Qué piensas cuando tú comenzas a vivir en este país? ¿Qué piensas? ¿Tiene muchos obstáculos o piensas estamos locos en este país o qué piensas?
Bueno, en primer lugar, yo como ser de la selva, yo sentí, nunca había visto una ciudad tan grande como pero también extrañé mucho a mi selva más que todo y a mi gente. Pero después, poco a poco, fui comprendiendo al compartir con diferentes mundos, o sea, el mundo de aquí, el mundo de ustedes, pero yo soy un ser humano y tengo que respetar porque mi espiritualidad no me ha enseñado a insultar a nadie, aunque le vea muy destruido en la calle.
Mm-hmm. He said, well, at first he'd never seen such a big city because first he came to Los Angeles.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And naturally he missed the jungle and he missed his people, but little by little, he found it interesting to share in this different world, and he respected everybody because that is part of his spiritual life, and his spiritual path is to never insult anybody and to accept everything.
Porque si yo veo con malos ojos a cosas que existen en el mundo, nunca voy a construirme, sino voy a destruirme. Mejor yo he visualizado cosas para cambiar la forma en que en los países tecnológicos existe, y por esto es lo que yo estoy aquí, las personas que me creen, para compartir la sabiduría de mis antepasados, mi sabiduría, y así para cambiar el mundo natural.
He said because, well, it's an expression, is if he looked at it with bad eyes, it would be destructive rather than constructive, and he would rather be constructive, and he sees where he can change what is destructive by sharing the knowledge of his ancestors.
Y nosotros, los espirituales, no podemos ver mal, porque mejor hay que ver con buenos ojos, poniendo el poder de Arutam y poniendo los ojos de nuestros antepasados para que ellos nos ayuden y ayuden las cosas negativas que podemos ver aquí en los países desarrollados.
He said that he cannot see these people with bad eyes. He sees everyone in a good light, because in that way he can give them a little of the power of his ancestors and give them a little of the eyes of his ancestors to help them live a life of more peace.
I want to thank both of you for being on our program today, as we're running short on time here. What I'd like you to do, if you could, is please let our listeners know how they can contact you and find out more about what you're doing so they can learn to rekindle that light that's within all of us.
Oh, thank you. They could go to our website, which is nunkuishuar.org, and that's nunkui-shuar.org. And there's information there about Anank, and there's Anank's email address and ways to contact him and learn more about what he's doing and where he's speaking. He'll be in Arizona in October and different places if they want to come here and meet him face-to-face.
Anank, Catherine, thank you for both joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Oh, thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
You bet. So there you go. It's up to you, the individual, to take one step at a time. It just takes one step and one person stepping in the right direction to automatically give the light to others so that they can do the same. It's as I remember a prominent journalist who was making a very good living in journalism said, even though I make the kind of money that I make, I still shop at Goodwill because I'm making a conscious choice in which not to continue allowing sweat factories and bad labor to continue. Just go ahead and wear something someone else has worn. It's also a form of recycling. I guess we could all probably learn from that lesson. We encourage you to visit us at our website at beyond50radio.com. That's the number 50 with a 50. Sign up for our free weekly e-newsletter. Also be sure to visit us at our blog, where we archive all of our shows and have wonderful resources for you to use as well as share with others. Thank you again for tuning in. You've been listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. Remember, live your day past halfway.